Hello chess friends and welcome to Najdorf Chess channel and welcome to the Chess 24 Legends of Chess tournament in 2020. We are now in the super final. It's Jan Nepomniachtchi against the world champion Magnus Carlsen, and Jan has, I think, every right to be confident because in the past he had a positive result against Magnus Carlsen. But okay, that thing has changed now. But the funny thing is, when they were kids, when they were like 12, 13 years old, Jan Nepomniachtchi was much stronger than Magnus Carlsen. He won, for instance, the World Youth Chess Championship. He was much stronger than Magnus, and about now, of course, the cards have changed. Now Magnus is basically unbeatable. He wins almost every tournament that he's playing, but we'll see what will happen in the future, because Jan Nepomniachtchi plays also a very strong tournament in these candidates, and he is now leading combined with Maxim Vasyl, so he has two good chances even to challenge Magnus Carlsen in the next year for the World Championship throne. So okay, this is now this rapid format in which Jan Nepomniachtchi played also great attacking games. He played quite attractive games, which is the most important thing for us. I think that he hasn't played a boring game so far, so that's why he deserves to be in the final, and now he faces the world champion. So let's now start with the first game. So we have now the round one, and let's start it with this cool Mortal Kombat sound. So round one, fight. So okay, here Jan opened with the move e4, c5, knight to f3, d6, d4, c takes d, knight takes d, and after knight to f6, knight to c3, we have a6. This is what I've been waiting for. It's a6, the Najdorf. So Jan Nepomniachtchi, a great tactical player against the world champion who plays now the Najdorf defense. So this cannot be boring. So in the game, Jan played a very aggressive rook to g1. This is maybe a surprise, but it's playable because most of the times you see that black and white will castle on opposite sides. So it means white will castle on the queen side, black will castle on the king side. So far this move, rook to g1, is already preparing a flank attack here with the move g4, g5. In the game, b5 played by Magnus. Magnus counterattacks immediately on the queen side, so they're sensing their ideas. I want to attack you on the queen side, you want to attack me on the king side. So great attacking game so far. So g4, we have bishop to b7, and now a very interesting idea by Jan Nepomniachtchi, g5. It leaves, of course, this knight hanging, the pawn hanging on e4. After knight to e4, bishop to e4, maybe Magnus was a little bit not satisfied with the outcome of this particular line. Queen to e2 would be the possibility here for Jan, and after bishop to b7, maybe f4. But I don't think that white has so much here, because I would simply continue with the good defensive idea here, knight to d7, and after something like f5, the main defensive idea, I think, here would be something like knight to e5 to cement our knight on a very active square. Still, this knight can be challenged maybe with some bishop to f4 ideas, but okay, as I said, it's playable. Maybe here g6, bishop to g7 is also a possibility here for Nepomniachtchi. Okay, Magnus didn't play this move knight to e4. He went into a more normal line with knight to d7. Here we have a3, preventing also some b4 ideas by Magnus, because if b4 happens, then of course the bishop could take now the pawn on e4. That's why this a3 also a common idea in the Najdorf. You would play that move anyway, so that's why it's not a weakening move here. g6 played by Magnus, trying to develop the dark square bishop, and now h4. You see how Jan is challenging now the world champion. Show me what you got here. Really a great attacking move, h4. We have bishop to g7, and now h5. Knight to c6. We have bishop to e3. This is now not the same, but a similar game, like for instance in the Dragon Sicilian, in which Magnus has developed the dark square bishop here on this diagonal, challenging white here in the center on the square d4. But trading off the pieces on d4 is not so powerful for black, as the queen could come into the game here on d4, and it would aim, of course, against this rook on h8. If you castle here immediately on the king side, then h6 would be also sort of a tricky idea. In the game, knight to c5 was played, and now we have f3, protecting, of course, the e4 pawn, and now castling. Here comes, I think, the first inaccuracy by Jan Nepomniachtchi. He played the move h takes g6. This is move, which of course opens the h file, but there is one problem in the Najdorf. I've read some books, I've watched also some other videos about the Najdorf. The problem for white in the Najdorf is that basically white cannot checkmate black on the back rank. That's the main problem of the Najdorf when you play it from white's perspective. Why is that so? If you're familiar maybe with the common Dragon Sicilian defense, then you know white continues with the common queen to d2, maybe bishop to h6 ideas, this queen and bishop battery in order to get rid of the dark square bishop, which is of course a good defender, and then tries maybe something like rook to h1 and also creating checkmate threats on the h file. But the problem is now that you have already advanced your pawn on g5, and now you see the dark square bishop is blocked out. You cannot force trades of bishops on h6 anymore. So far black is not in danger to get checkmated somehow. Even if the queen somehow sneaks in, you wouldn't have checkmate ideas, because after rook to e8 you could maybe bring one check, but you cannot proceed with queen to h8 as the bishop is covering that square. So that's the main problem now of white. We cannot force trades of dark square bishops. We cannot go into and create checkmate threats. But what still white wants to do is to play something like f4, f5, splitting the pawns in front of the king and opening the files, opening diagonals in front of black's king, and still try some counterattack possibilities. So in the game, as said, h takes g6, maybe a better idea is here queen to d2, simply keeping the position flexible. Here g takes h6, g takes h5, pardon me, is never good for black, because then rook to h1, rook takes h5, and then this h6 and h7 pawn could be weakness, and then we can proceed. So still, that's why queen to d2, I think it's a better move. After knight takes d, bishop takes d, maybe here bishop takes d4, queen takes d4, and now knight to e6 would solve, I think, black's positional problems, for at least for a while. But still, white would still have possibilities to play something like h6 and always force maybe some checkmate threats on g7. But as I said, h takes g6 was played, which was Jan's inaccuracy, because now the f file is opened. You see there is this weakness of this pawn on f3 in the game, and knight to c6 was played. If you try something like bishop to e2 in order to protect this pawn on f3 for a while, then again knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, and now knight to e6. Again, this same defensive idea could happen. If you take bishop takes g7, then Magnus would have a great counterattack here. It's queen to b6. Attacking here the rook, you would be forced to play something like rook to g4, and now after king to g7, this is a good position for black, because now we can cement our knight on d4. We can even force maybe a trade of queens. This h7 is not a problem anymore, as we have moved the king on the 7th rank, and even if something happens here on the h file, then we could go something like rook to h8 and still have good defensive resources. So this position is, I think, playable here for black. It's a perfect position, still with possibilities to play something like rook to c8, attacking here the c file, with possibilities maybe in long terms a5, b4. So this is, as I said, just some planning ideas. You see how problematic this h takes g6 idea was by Jan Nepomniachtchi, because now this f3 is a long-term weakness. In the game, Nepo tried knight takes c6, releasing the pressure in the center, bishop takes c6, and now bishop to h3. Again, maybe bishop to e2 is better, at least for a while. You're protecting this pawn. In the game, here bishop to h2 was played, and now bishop takes c3, played by Magnus. A brave idea, because you're giving up the dark square bishop in an early stage of the game. Still, you have some dark square problems in front of the king. But okay, Magnus went for this line in which he at least gave up the bishop for the initiative, because after b takes c3, we have now, of course, a weakened pawn structure. All of these pawns are clear targets of blacks. You have to protect them. And after the move b takes c3, here Magnus plays now in inaccuracy and allows Nepo to go into the game, because this is a perfect position. A better idea is here to play simply queen to a5. That's the main problem, because you cannot play queen to d2. You cannot protect then anymore the f3 pawn. You would be forced to play the move bishop to d2. And again, I'm pointing out that this bishop is still blocked out by its own pawn. So this dark square weaknesses that black has cannot be exploited immediately. It has to be prepared, of course, further. So bishop to d2 would be a forced line here for white in order to defend here the pawn on c3. But now I think black has really a great activity with rook to f7. After something like queen to e2, see, we can simply double up rooks attacking this f3 weakness. After something like bishop to g4, it's not a problem. We can simply force trades of bishops here if we trade. And after something like rook to f1, you see knight to e5 comes. Again, this f3 is simply too much to handle. You can play maybe something like f4, but now knight to c4, and this is a great cemented knight. It's sort of an octopus. The problem is for white here now that you cannot kick away this knight with any minor pieces. You still have the dark bishop on the board, but you cannot kick this knight away with some pawn moves. You see, you don't have any more the d pawn, you don't have any more the b pawn. This would be a perfect position, but that was only possible if you play, of course, queen to a5. In the game, Magnus played an inaccuracy and he played the move e5. Bishop to c5, if you have asked yourself this question, if that is good, that's not good, because after d takes c5 and a potential trades of queens, you see now that the pawn structure of black is much more healthier. Still, again, I'm pointing out these are simply weak pawns, and still this backward pawn is something that you have to handle. So this is again a better position for black. Simply a healthy pawn structure is here, and I think that Magnus will win this game very easily. In the game, as I said, bishop to g4 was played by Nepo after the move e5 here. In the game, queen to e7, here queen to d2, and now rook to d8. What Magnus has accomplished here is the so-called Boleslavsky hold position. This is really a common pawn structure that can happen to you in the middle game. We have still this backward pawn. It's so far good, well protected. And one of the main goals of blacks here is to play the move now d5. Because first of all, we have built this weakness. Now we were trying to improve the weakness with the potential d5 move. And okay, opening the position is also quite risky, because then you could have some troubles, because then you're opening the position for the bishops. But as a long-term plan, again, d5 is perfectly fine. So here, that's why c4 played by Nepo. At least he tries to mess up Magnus Carlsen's pawn structure, and after b takes c4, we have now queenside castling. Very risky move here by Nepo, castling into really a weird position. There are several weaknesses. This a3 is a weakness. There are tactical threats, of course, on the b file. In the game, knight to e6 played by Magnus, and again, Magnus gives Nepo opportunities to get back into the game. A better idea is here, I believe, knight to a4 with potential, as I said, d5, queen to a3 moves. This would be a good position here for black. I'm not sure how white should defend this, but here after the move knight to e6, it's now Nepo that has at least some kind of a counterattack. He played queen to c3, which is the accurate move now, with possibilities to play queen takes c4. Bishop to d7. Again, Magnus plays, I'm not sure why, but he plays several inaccuracies. A better idea is here to play knight to d4. What we want to do is at least, again, force a trade of minor pieces and go into a favorable endgame with a better pawn structure. After potential bishop to d4, you see e takes d4 and rook takes d4. We would have the opportunity to play queen takes g5, and I think that black is again better here. But after the move bishop to d7 here, it allows now Nepo to go queen to c4, and really now challenging black's knight here. The knight is twice attacked. There are these pieces are a little bit overloaded to the defense of this knight on e6. We have king to g7 getting out of the light squares, and now queen to b4. Now Magnus has the opportunity to get back into the game, because here a better idea for Nepo is simply to take queen to a6, and we are attacking now the d6 pawn. So after something like rook to a8, we would simply force a trade of queens and simplify the position, and I think then white is better in the continuation of the game. So again, Nepo missed something here, and he played the move queen to b4, which allows now Magnus to play a great counterattack. He played the move knight to f4. He blocks out the bishop with a great tactical variation. After bishop to f4, we have bishop to g5. G4, that's the main idea. And now after rook takes g4, we have rook to f4. But now after rook to f4, here that was the great thing that Magnus Carlsen calculated, giving us another sound to that. Here queen takes g5. He pins the rook on f4. You see, at least Magnus has grabbed another pawn. In the game, rook takes d6 was played, and now queen to f4 comes with the check, which is the most important thing. And after king to b1, now we have a new position in which Magnus has now perfect endgame, because we have the pass pawn on the h file. And the most important thing is that the king is so far away that the king cannot compete here with the pawn. That's why this is a winning endgame, but you have to be accurate in order to win this queen and pawn endgame, because queen and pawn endgames are really tough sometimes, because you're sometimes vulnerable to your opponent's perpetual check. So when you allow maybe some queen to e7, queen to h5, if you could just imagine, if you allow your opponent some perpetuals, then it's only a draw. But we know that Magnus Carlsen is a great endgame player, and he simply pushes the pawn h5. We have c4, queen takes f3, queen to e5, and now forcing again trades of queens, because if queen to f6, king to f6 will happen, you cannot make something happen here, as this is really a distant pass pawn. The king is too far away. This king can compete even with these two pawns. If you try to push, we'll simply go here. And okay, we cannot attack maybe this pawn because c6 will happen or something, but at least white cannot make progress. And now it's time for us to push the pawn h4, h3, h2, and it's game over for white. So that's why queen to d5, Magnus simply pushes the pawn further. Queen to f1, we have king to a2, queen to g2, again some checks, and now simply pushing another pawn. c6, it seems now that Nepo has also some great counterattack possibilities, but now h2. Here Nepo tries some perpetuals, as I said, king to h6, and now queen to d8. What the main idea is, of course, to play something like queen to h8, and then again queen to d8, again some perpetuals. Queen to e5, very nice move by Magnus. He prevents this queen to h8 idea. Queen to h4, king to g7, and you see now you cannot do any more checks. The pawn is protected, and still we have now several choices. The main idea of ours is maybe somewhere to deliver a check. A perfect idea would be something like queen takes e4, then to get a check and promote here to h1. But it has to be prepared. You have to be patient. In the game, queen to b3, Magnus plays some checks. After queen to c6, at least he gained this pawn, which was also very annoying to handle. So now it's a completely winning endgame here. Queen to d3, queen to d6, and now queen to e2. Queen takes a3. The problem is now if you take the pawn, you see, then you get queen to a2 and you lose the queen. King to f2, again, queen to b2. We have queen to g3, queen to f6. Forcing again a trade of queens. If you play queen takes h2, then you get queen to e5, and you have to trade off the queens. And again, we're having this distant pass pawn on the a file. So again, it's game over. In the game, queen to h3, and now a very, very nice move, queen to c3 here played by Magnus, and it was game over in this position. Nepo resigned, because if you take again the same idea, queen takes h3, h5, h4, it's game over. So great game, but with really many inaccuracies, blunders. But of course, this is this rapid time format. So far, great opening preparation by Nepomniachtchi. Maybe he has to improve something in this particular line. He had good chances. You saw that Magnus didn't see also the best lines. Okay, we'll see what will happen in the continuation. This is now the first game. I'll try to cover as many of these games as possible of this tournament. If you want to see more games of this Chess 24 Legends of Chess tournament, check out my link. Here are the games that I've analyzed so far. If you want to see the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history, here's also the link. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.